Hey AP World History students, I'm Miss Ziegler, the Time Machine teacher, and today we are talking about religions. There are several main religions that we will be discussing throughout the year. The first three that I'm going to discuss in this video are the Abrahamic religions. Let me spell that for you. Abrahamic religions get their name from deriving from the sons of Abraham. We have three religions in this group. The first one is Judaism, then Christianity, and Islam. So let me first explain to you how this all starts. We have a guy named Abraham. He's married to a woman named Sarah, and they're unable to have children. The story goes that they ask God for a son, and for a long time, Sarah is not able to get pregnant. Therefore, she tells Abraham, go ahead and take another wife and have a baby with her so that we can have children. Abraham gets a woman named Hagar pregnant with a son named Ishmael. Sarah eventually has a baby and she names him Isaac. Therefore, Abraham now has two sons. Islamic religion derives out of Ishmael's descendants, and the Jewish religion derives out of Isaac's descendants. The Christians also adhere to the belief that Isaac is the chosen firstborn. So the Christian religion falls on this side as well. All three of these religions, therefore, have ties to Abraham. Islam through Ishmael, and Judaism and Christian through Isaac. All three of these religions are also monotheistic. And that's what makes these three religions somewhat tied together, even still today. The oldest of these three monotheistic religions is Judaism. We learn about Judaism from the Hebrew scriptures. The religious scriptures of Judaism is the Torah. According to the scriptures, Abraham founded an area called Canaan and later moved out into the Mesopotamian region. The Hebrews were then enslaved by various groups and led to freedom by Moses. After that, their kingdoms divided and went on what was called a diaspora, or a spreading out. Also, according to the scriptures, the Jewish people were given the Holy Land to be their homeland, which would be modern-day Israel. At the time, though, there were other people living there. When the Persians controlled Jerusalem, Jewish people were allowed back in. However, that didn't last very long, and soon Jews suffered discrimination. This was all around the time of 520s BCE, and after the Persians lost their control of that area, the Jews were discriminated against even more and continued to spread their culture throughout the world because they weren't living in one place. In the 1st century CE, we see Christianity emerge with the teachings of Jesus. It was mostly popular among the poor, the slaves, and women. Christianity appealed to them because it taught a hope for the afterlife, therefore a hope that you would have something after death. Christianity spreads through the teaching of Jesus and his disciples through the Roman Empire. Eventually, Jesus is crucified by the Romans, and that is supported by the Jewish elite. That is the basis of Christian teaching. Because of Jesus' crucifixion, those who believe in Jesus and accept him as their Savior can go to heaven as a result of the forgiveness of their sins due to the fact that Jesus paid for their sins by being crucified. The hope of being able to go to heaven was just enough to attract the poor and people who didn't have a very good life on earth. The religious scriptures of Christianity is the Bible. Christianity will then spread through the trade routes, which we'll talk about in the coming weeks. The last of the three Abrahamic religion is Islam, which is rooted in the faith of one God, Allah. And the last of the great prophets was Muhammad. The roots of this religion started around the 6th century with the Bedouins, who worshipped several gods, but Allah was their supreme God. Muhammad was born in 570, and he worked as a caravan manager for the trade routes in the area. Over the course of several years, he is said to have had revelations from Allah, explaining to him that he was the last prophet. These are the revelations that would later be collected in the Quran. The teachings of Islam spread through Muhammad. He is not worshipped as a divine being as Jesus is worshipped as a divine being. He is just revered as the last prophet. However, during his life, some of his teachings conflicted with the existing leadership, and he fled persecution and went to Medina. Later, he would return to Mecca and conquer it. Muslims were typically religiously tolerant of areas that they would conquer, often charging a tax in order to keep your religion. There are 5 core principles of Islam that we'll talk about in this class. Number 1 is believing Allah is the one true God. Number 2 is praying 5 times a day. Number 3 is giving alms to the poor. Number 4 is fasting during Ramadan. And number 5 is making a pilgrimage to Mecca at least once in your life. One last thing we'll discuss before we start talking about the other religions is the Holy Land, specifically Jerusalem or Israel. It's also known as Palestine, and there's reasons why it's so conflicting. The Christians and the Jews and the Muslims all have ties to this area. The Jewish people have ties to it because of the old temple. And you can see that in this picture here of the Western Wall. This is called the Wailing Wall. And this is the last wall of the original Jewish temple that still exists. The Jews want to rebuild the temple. The unfortunate part is that what is sitting on top of the temple, the Dome of the Rock, it belongs to the Islamic religion as a holy site. The Dome of the Rock is believed to be the spot where Muhammad ascended into heaven. It's also believed to be the spot where Abraham was going to sacrifice his son Isaac, which ties it to the Jewish religion. The Christians are on the side of the Jewish people, and they want that area given back to the Jews. This is a huge problem for that area, with all 3 of these religions having ties to the same land. And that is why historically there is so much struggle, even today, over that area. More problems arise after World War II when the Jews want a homeland. And they specifically want a homeland in the Holy Land of Israel. At the time, that area was called Palestine. And when the Jews went in to take it back, they had to kick out people who lived there. That has caused strife that still continues to this day. All of that ties back to the Abrahamic religions and the ties that they had back in ancient times. Let's talk about China. In ancient China, there was something called the Mandate of Heaven. And basically, the Mandate of Heaven was what gave the ruling dynasty power. If things were going well, then that meant that you had God on your side and that you were meant to be ruling that area. However, if things were not going well, then that meant that you lost the Mandate of Heaven and that dynasty should go away and make room for a new dynasty. This was a way of legitimizing power, or getting people to follow the dynasty or those in rule. Another idea that was popular in ancient China was ancestor veneration, or the idea that your ancestors would speak to the gods for you. They would go to the gods on your behalf. Therefore, in ancient China, they would respect their elders by giving offerings to their elders in hopes that the elders would intercede to the gods for them. Fast forward to 551 BCE, when Confucius comes on the scene. He was a philosopher, so technically Confucian is not a religion. It's more of a philosophy or a belief system. But we talk about it at the same time with religions because it's a driving force of the belief systems in China. Confucian philosophy stems around the golden rule. Treat others how you want to be treated. This is the main idea in Christianity and Judaism as well. In Confucianism, respect is very important, and knowing your role is important as well. When you read primary documents about Confucianism, you will see that a lot. It may talk about the role of husband and wife and how the wife should honor her husband. It may talk about the role of father and son. Women had very few rights in China under Confucianism and not a lot of education. Although they were respected in being able to bear children, they were often treated as servants in the husband's home. Filial piety is very important in regards to Confucianism because it's all about respect of one's family. Daoism, also spelled Taoism, dates back to the 500s BCE. To follow the Tao, you are to renounce worldly pleasures and ambitions and instead harmonize with nature. A key symbol of the Tao is yin and yang. which shows two sides together in harmony. So where Confucianism was more about respect, Daoism is more about returning to nature. And in contrast to both of these is another philosophy called Legalism. They're less concerned with how people perceive the meaning of life and more about how they behave. They believed that because humans were typically bad, that there needed to be laws and punishment put in place to rule people. For a while, legalism and Confucianism will kind of go head to head, but eventually legalism will fade out and Confucianism will take more of a central role in China. We'll now move on to India and talk about Buddhism. Buddhism comes about in 530 BCE. This one is also more like a philosophy than it is a religion, and it started by a prince who meditated for 4 days and received enlightenment. Buddhism is summarized by 4 noble truths, which basically says that suffering comes from wanting worldly pleasures and desires, and if we abandon that, we can follow the eightfold path to enlightenment, which will eventually lead to a peaceful afterlife called Nirvana. One important thing to remember about Buddhism is that it rejects the caste system, therefore is liked by the lowly members of society because they don't want to be lowly members of the society anymore. Hinduism starts spreading around the same time as Buddhism. Hinduism does believe in the caste system, which is basically the class system in India at the time. You're born into your caste or class, and the goal is to live as good of a life as you can in order to be reincarnated after your death into a better position. Reincarnation means that after you die, you would come back as something else. For example, if you are in the lowest caste and you live a really good life, it's a possibility that when you come back in your next life, you might be rewarded by being in the higher caste. Throughout world history, we will see how Buddhists and Hindus clash, and it's important to know that one of the reasons is because they just don't agree on the way things work. And that wraps up this brief overview of world religions that we will be talking about this year in world history. We will go more in depth as we are teaching, but I just wanted you to know the basics going into things. And as always, if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure and click that subscribe button and don't forget to turn on notifications so that you don't miss a thing. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. It was mostly popular among the poor. Pretty interesting.